welcome back to this evening edition. This is the Daily Debate. Today, the world marks International Holocaust Remembrance Day. One of the main questions that always arises out of the largest scale crime in the history of humanity is, could it happen again? Could violence backed with extreme ideology rise to enough power, allow these kind of atrocities again? What allows this to happen in different parts of the world? And with me today to discuss this matter, investigative journalist and Nazi treasure hunter, Yaron Interview. Hello, thank you very much for coming back again. And lawyer Yoram Sheftel, defense attorney and broadcaster. Good evening.
Shalom, good evening.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
You know, I don't know if to ask the question, could it happen again, while Syria is on the headlines almost every day, is the right question to ask. Because maybe the world is forgetting what happened 69 years ago.
I think that Yoram should explain the past.
Well, first of all, I would like to say that there is no historical event worthwhile more to have an anniversary than the Holocaust, because an international anniversary, because the Holocaust was an international joint venture. On top of Germany, all the nations of Europe, except the Bulgarians and the Danes, took part in it under the leadership of Great Britain and the Soviet Union. Soviet Union army stood for 6 months, 25 miles of Auschwitz, while 700,000 Jews were slaughtered and deliberately didn't intervene. The Americans made 2,800 air sorties with bombs over Auschwitz from November 43 till December 44, didn't drop one bomb on Auschwitz, deliberately saying that they don't have a military capability to do it, while they made 2,800 sorties over Auschwitz. And the Catholic Church and the leadership of the Palestinian Arabs by Hajj Amin al-Husseini, who was the general of the SS, spent all the Second World War, all the Shoah time in Berlin, and was assisting the Nazis in anti-Semitic propaganda and drafting 30,000 Muslims to the SS. So this is an international joint venture to exterminate the Jewry of Europe.
So of course there should be International Commemoration Day.
My sense is that, taking Yoram's thing further, is that in today's atmosphere, what's happening in Syria, for instance, is very close to what happened then. Of course, the size is much smaller because the Holocaust and World War II were much larger. But again, there's a sense that terrible things are happening just around our border and the world does nothing. So in a sense, while historically, the Holocaust was part of a very well-planned and executed Nazi plan with Germany and by others. This is a very interesting example when Syria is going through one of the worst periods in modern time of slaughter, and everyone looks around, moves their heads up and down, but no one does anything. And currently, the world is flooded by new neo-Nazi movements. The worst example at the moment is...
What is happening in France?
Well, France is terrible, and the growth of neo-Nazis is based on the old anti-Semitism, but now they've got someone else who's Semitic, the Muslims, and they are seen as the big enemy. However, they still use the old anti-Semitic slogans and the sense that this is happening again. In Greece, I'll just finish, in Greece, the biggest rising movement is a real Nazi movement, and actually a Nazi party, which is great, which is the third party currently in Greece.
By the way, the ruling party in Syria calls itself National Socialist. The Ba'ath is a socialist, nationalist, Arab movement. This is how they describe and identify themselves.
So if we want to draw a picture of the new face of anti-Semitism in 2014, what is the picture that we're going to see? What is the kind of, what is
the average guy? The average guy would be first of all, it's rising in what used to be the communist the East. It's rising in thousands of degrees. It's usually people see the anti-Semitic slogans and the part of hating the Jews as a smaller part of what's happening. And many of these countries, there are no Jews left. And yet the anti-Semitic sense is rising, and it is against foreigners. And I think that what Sheftel said about the beginning of World War II, it began by hating the Jews, and then the Slavs, and then the Catholics, etc. So it grows. The face of the current day neo-Nazi is no different than an average thug, but with ideology. And when once it was possible to talk about Israel as Israel is okay, but Jews are not, today anti-Semitism is rising because you can now scream against Israel, but use it with the old anti-Semitic slogans.
Or even to take the last point further, the lies which are being told now internationally about Israel, about Zionism, describing Israel as apartheid state and so on, are as vicious, as sheer lies, as what they used to say about the Jews before and during the Holocaust time. Exactly the same tactics, the same lies, the same hatred.
So I want to ask you...
Now, the new Satan is Israel and Zionism.
I want to make your life a little bit difficult.
Which is even called many times Nazism. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah.
People call Israel a Nazi state.
Yeah.
I want to make your life a little bit difficult.
Okay.
A little difficult. How do you call the price tag that the settlers in Israel are doing towards the Palestinians?
I think that moves away from the whole Nazi. The price tag is ridiculous.
It's
a kind of a behavior. We are talking about extreme racist behavior that we are talking.
95% of the activities of the settlers in Judea and Samaria. It's writing
slogans.
Slogans, the price tags.
No, but there is a special word which describing slogans on the wall.
Graffiti.
Graffiti, that's it, 95%. I'm not saying 100%. 95%, this is sheer graffiti on walls. Now, to make, and this is a good example.
I think we're moving away from the Holocaust.
To make comparison, for instance, from murderers, Arabs, which slaughtered the family of Fogel.
We have to go back to the Holocaust.
One second, that slaughtered the family of Fogel. 3 little kids below
we're moving
3
away
years
from the
old.
Holocaust.
To make comparison to this, to what the settlers in
but
Judea and Samaria make,
we are talking about assertive behavior and ideology. And
I disagree. I think that's wrong. I think that the political problem currently between Israel and Palestinians, Israel and the Arab world, has got nothing to do with the Holocaust. Today we're trying to remember the international Holocaust and the idea that this was a systematic plan done by the Germans to destroy the Jews, and with the help of many others. However, even talking about settlers and Palestinians is taking this argument away, which is a political argument, which I think should be done on a different day.
Yes, but
you've got very solid ideas about the war, not about Palestinians.
I must take exception of what you just said, because the origin of the so-called Palestinian national movement.
We are now moving to a different...
pure, sheer Nazi movement. The head of the Palestinian movement for 44 years was a general in the SS, which accepted his general degree from the hands of Himmler and spent all the Second World War in Berlin. I'm talking about the sources. I'm not saying that today they are exactly the followers, but the origin is pure Nazi. Pure Nazi.
No, there's no argument here. Let's talk about the actual Holocaust.
I want to bring it back to the actual Holocaust.
Right.
And the main question that we are asking tonight, can it happen again? Can it happen again
in the same way it happened? No. Because
we have a Jewish state.
We have a Jewish state which will not allow it to happen. But even if we're not talking about Jews and the rest of the world, can it happen elsewhere? It did. It happened in Rwanda, it happened in Kosovo and other places, and the world stood aside. What's happening in Syria is again a murder of, unfortunately,
how
the same
come,
people.
I have to ask you both, how come the world is standing aside after a mass destruction that happened to the Jewish people? 6 million people were killed.
Because we are not Europe or America. Kosovo is seen as a bunch of people outside, Syrians are a bunch of Arabs. They're all seen in a big black picture. If it would have happened in current day Europe within a week, this would have been solved. In America, 2 days. Do you agree?
Look, Kosovo is a good example. Kosovo was stopped by NATO.
Yeah.
But
At the end, it took 3.5 years.
Why? Because it was obvious that there wouldn't be a great sacrifice from the Western power to stop Kosovo.
Right.
However, they think, and the public opinion in the West think, that going against Syria will lead to a war. Now, the average person in the West does not want to be involved in war, whatever the cost of that war is. And whatever the cost of doing nothing is. He is more interested not to be involved in war than the consequences of not being involved in such a war.
And I think that in most thinking today in the Western world, in America especially, after Afghanistan and after Iraq, they will not have boots on the ground, which means they actually need soldiers on the ground. Since that's not going to happen, the whole idea of leading from behind, what Obama did in Libya, is ridiculous. Can it happen again? Absolutely. Can it happen to the Jewish people? Absolutely not.
I want to ask you something about Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. In every maybe single lecture that he gives outside, there will always be a remembrance for the Holocaust. He will always mention the Holocaust, even if it's in a tech meeting or technology meeting or cyber meeting or whatever. Is it okay to bring it up each and every time that you are outside and not to actually, when you're talking about it, to give it the time, to give it the meaning, to give it the purpose?
I tend to agree. I think that, look, doing it too much is creating a situation where people just don't want to hear. But I think that it's absolutely correct. When he stands in the United Nations and talks to the world, he reminds them, Israel will not go through it, will not allow it to happen again.
When Netanyahu gave his last speech to the US Congress, he was quoting from a letter which was sent from the Secretary of State to the Jewish Congress in January 45, saying America has no military power and cannot stop by bombing the death camps. I mean, such a sheer lie. And it is a necessity, especially when you are in the American Congress, to remind the Americans that their hands are also stained with a lot of Jewish blood.
It doesn't have to be brought up every time, I'm not sure.
Yes, every time.
Yes.
Every time, yes, every time. Not every day.
That's
because,
it.
Because Netanyahu is not speaking in front of the Congress every day.
But
But speaking in front of the Congress every 2 or 3 years. Then every time it has to be brought.
I agree with you, but not in every meeting that happens, because it actually makes the Holocaust seem small. Okay, we just heard about it. Thank you, Mr. Netanyahu. It has to be brought up in much more sincere ways, and not necessarily every day. And I agree with your question, but I think it has to be brought up, but in a different way.
Netanyahu does not talk about the Holocaust every day, but he does take
95%. 95% of the time.
I would say that in most cases he mentioned the Holocaust properly in forms that it's a must to mention it and to remind everyone on its own stake in the Holocaust, because the Holocaust would never happen. The Holocaust would never happen without passive assistance of Soviet Union, of Great Britain, of United States of America, of the Catholic Church.
Yoram, the sense is not exactly, did it happen with their help? Yeah, historically, we have differences of opinion, but historically it did happen. Does it have to be mentioned every day? Could very well be. Could very well be. Not on every subject. Not when you're talking to people in Davos or other places. Now, yes, we do have to remember the Holocaust. That's the reason. That's the raison d'être why we are here. Does not have to be mentioned every day, like other people don't have to mention.
Okay,
let's move on. Okay.
When talking to the international community, it has to be mentioned time and again.
And I think you lose the impact when it's mentioned time and again. But let's talk about neo-Nazi rise today. Do you
know that 16 minutes already been just went up. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for this. And we're going out for a small break, 10 minutes break, and update from our news desk, and then we will be back for the one-on-one. Don't go anywhere.
Good.